The magician's show took place in the same place it had taken place 6 years prior when Ivan had attended as a boy. When people had come to watch it, and Ivan watched as they all shuffled in. For hours he watched, waiting for the magician to come out from his tent and onto the stage, and for hours he was disappointed. He wanted to know if it was the same man who had been there 6 years ago, the same magician, the one who had brought the cube. Ivan had often pondered why the man had forgotten the cube. I left it behind, and sometimes he thought that it had been for him. But then why had it disappeared? Had someone else taken it? Had the thing returned to its owner? There were too many questions, no answers. Ivan hoped to find some now, here in this place that was so familiar to him. With a hefty and healthy skepticism, Ivan awaited the magician, but perhaps the skepticism he had held as a child had swayed somewhat. Still, sometimes he thought himself crazy and believed he had imagined the cube and everything to do with it. He wondered if he really had, though he so supposed he might find out tonight. Another hour or so passed, and it was becoming dark outside and cold. Fortunately, Ivan had prepared for it and was dressed in a warm jacket with gloves and a hat. He was somewhat particular like that. He always seemed to be at least moderately and modestly prepared for most circumstances, though perhaps his dress in the weather would be a somewhat trivial example. He often found himself thinking ahead, thinking of one scenario or another, or a dozen of them, and thinking of what he might do in any given case or scenario. He thought about what he would do if he saw the cube, or if the magician were the same man, or if he were a different man. Would he wait for him to end his show and then confront him? Would he discover the cube again by chance as he had as a child? What would happen? How would he react? He didn't know for sure, but he kept imagining different scenarios in his mind, and he prayed that whichever scenario played out this night, he would choose correctly when deciding his course of action. It meant everything to him to find the cube, as it was perhaps his only chance of finding his real parents, and although the parents that he had now were his parents, he knew that he must find his true parents. He knew that his foster parents would not be able to help him. He could also sense it, but he knew that they did not know how to find them. Ivan almost laughed at himself. Perhaps it would be easier simply to track the adoption records or whatever necessary course of action there was to complete there, but somehow he knew that it would lead nowhere. No, there was something more to his adoption. His parents, he knew it. Or perhaps he was simply insane. The magician appeared in a puff of not so impressive smoke, laughing and yelling all of a sudden, and it surprised Ivan. But nonetheless, he gathered closer. Gather round, he continued on like this for a time, the magician did. Ivan was disappointed to see that it was not the same man as it was when he was a child, or he was fairly certain. This magician was much younger than the old man from his childhood, and surely there was no magic out there that could make a man younger, but if the cube did exist, perhaps there was. These thoughts seemed to Ivan to be a rabbit hole, perhaps not worth going down, one that might actually put him in some kind of institution, in an asylum or something equally as terrible as that surely was. Maybe he thought to himself he should just go home. But he could not bring himself to do so, and further down the rabbit hole he plunged. But then he saw it, something, glittering in the tent. Was he imagining it? He stood up from where he was sitting and approached the thin blue and white tent. Yes, in the darkness he could see the light behind the curtain. He could see the cube. Approaching even closer, he made his way towards the entrance of the tent, but as he approached it, a man stood in front of him. He was a tall man and very large, larger than Ivan was, and much more built, much more sturdy. He pushed Ivan back. Ivan made a face, clearly angered by whomever was attacking him. "Get out of my way," Ivan snarled. "You're not allowed in there," said the man. He had a black mustache and a top hat, making him look like a magician himself, and perhaps he was one. Ivan shook his head. "I need to get inside." "You're not allowed in here," the man repeated. "Just let me," Ivan said as he tried to push his way past the man. The next thing he knew, his head was on the pavement, and he was out cold. When he awoke, he was in a hospital bed, his parents sitting beside his bed, beside him. His foster parents, that is, and he could feel a bandage wrapped around his head. The man with the top hat and the mustache was nowhere to be seen, and the cube, if it had been there at all, was again disappeared. A feeling of anger and deep regret and sadness entered Ivan's thoughts. He didn't even wonder how angry his parents must be. It turned out they weren't that angry, just glad he was okay. They weren't aware that he had even skipped school and thought that he had gone to the magician's show simply to have something to do after school, though they were somewhat unhappy that he had gone without telling them where he was going. His parents gave him a lot of autonomy, really, and at least for someone who was 16, and in a lot of ways this was a good thing, or so they thought, though perhaps they were rethinking that thought sitting in the hospital bed and staring at their injured son. Before Ivan could speak, his father spoke. "James said," as Esmeralda looked at him intently, "You're okay, thank God." Clearly they were very worried, but somehow this show of emotion did not affect Ivan much. In fact, he thought their worry was kind of excessive. He just bumped his head. "You're okay," Esmeralda repeated, a tear in her eye. "It's just a bump," Ivan explained. "Some jackass." "Language," Esmeralda managed to comment, staving off Ivan's retort. "Some person," Ivan said, gritting his teeth, "hit me, I think. That's all." Looks like they hit you pretty hard," James said, trying to poke a little fun at his wound. "Did you start it?" "Well, I didn't hit back, if you wanted to know," said Ivan, "but yeah, I kind of started it." James smiled, and although it seemed somewhat sincere, Ivan could tell that his father was angry. He knew that he would likely have to spend a lot of time in his room for the next month or so he thought. To Ivan's surprise, James spoke in a sort of proud way, as if he were happy that his son had gotten into a fight and survived it. Esmeralda was the exact opposite, and anyone in the hospital room could tell by the way that she looked at him that she was not happy, but she still went by what he said, nonetheless. "You've got a hard head," James said. "Lucky for you," he smiled again. Maybe that was genuine happiness. It was hard to tell. Ivan just smiled back, happy not to be in trouble. "Thanks, Dad," he sighed. Can we get out of here?" A nurse, tall and attractive, had been standing by the other side of the bed silently, and as Ivan asked if you were allowed to leave, she began to speak. "Not yet," she said. "We need to run a few more tests, but after that, you're free to go." "How much?" James sighed. "Sorry?" asked the nurse. How much will the bill be, he means," Esmeralda clarified. The nurse shrugged. "It's already taken care of." "By whom?" asked James, taking his surprise at a steady pace. "It's nice of them, but we'd like to pay them back." "I'm afraid that we aren't at liberty to give you that information," the nurse said, a smile on her face. James shrugged. "I won't complain." All of this made Ivan somewhat nervous, and it made him think that something more was afoot. James interrupted his thoughts for a moment and said, "But if I can pay him back, I would like to." Although perhaps that was kind of a paranoid thought for Ivan to be having, brought on by the head trauma that he had just experienced. He didn't know, but either way, it was an ominous feeling that he was feeling. Perhaps it would all be explained shortly after, he thought, however, as there was something next to him on the hospital bed. It was thin and light and felt like Ivan pulled out the piece of paper from his bed. "What's this?" he asked both of his parents. "A girl left that here," said Esmeralda. "Cute, too. She said her name was Miranda. You two met today?" Ivan nodded. "Miranda. No, I bet she knew I was here. She saw you fall," his father said. When the guy hit you, she said he was a big guy, too." "He was," Ivan nodded, opening the letter and laughing somewhat, grinning to himself. It read, "Ouch. Sorry for your luck, Ivan. Feel better. Oh, and there's something I wanted to tell you, but I need to tell you in person. If you're wondering what it's about, well, it's about what we spoke of earlier. Come back to the store tomorrow. I'll be there once you get off school." "Yes, I know you're in high school. Your mom told me. Anyway, see you then, Miranda." Ivan wondered what it was Miranda was talking about. Maybe it was just the concussion. But was she talking about the cube? There was only one way to find out.